I want to introduce you to a lady who just said to me backstage that she's feeling so hopeful about the future of this movement, and he's loving the energy with the audience. So I want you to keep those energy levels up because this lady really deserves it. She is the founder of Connected Baby and the co-organizer of this event, but much, much more as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Suzanne Zeedyk.
I want to tell you a story. 1 month ago today, exactly, I sat in a theater in Edinburgh on the last day of the Edinburgh Festival at a performance of Les Miserables, staged by the Captivate Theatre Company. And it was absolutely stunning. Les Miserables was performed by young people aged 18 years and younger, by a company that was founded in order to help as many young people across the city and beyond as possible to experience the joy of musical theater and drama. And I have to say, it was the best performance of Les Miserables I've ever seen. I was blown away. And I was so impressed by the young people of Captivate Theatre that I decided to take a risk today when I realized that in 1 month's time exactly, I would be standing on this stage. Because the point of Les Miserables is that it was a time of revolution. For any of you who have seen that very popular musical, people put their lives on the line for the world that they dreamed. We do not have to put our lives on the line today. What we have to put on the line is ourselves. So I decided to put myself on the line by having no PowerPoint slides. I've never done this before. I've also never spoken in an audience of 2,000 people. And I thought, oh, Suzanne, are you really going to push it that far? And then I thought if I could take that risk, maybe it would help other people to take risks. And if I could tell you I was doing that, maybe it would help other people to find ways to tell people when they take risks. Because that performance was so stunning, it sent me back to the book on which that musical theater is based. And that book is by Victor Hugo, written in 1862. And when that book was published, he said to his publisher, when he asked why did he want to publish that book, here is what Victor Hugo had to say. Social problems go beyond frontiers. Humankind's wounds, those huge sores that litter the world, do not stop at the lines drawn on maps. Wherever men go in ignorance, wherever women sell themselves for bread, wherever children lack a book or a hearth that is warm, Les Miserables knocks at the door and says, "Open up. I am here." Victor Hugo wrote a book to comfort other people in distress, in hunger, in times of economic inequality and political unease. Victor Hugo was trying to tackle the same things we are trying to tackle today, and he dreamed a different world, and he hoped that what he did would help. He didn't know. He never lived long enough to know it got turned into a piece of musical theater, but his impact has lasted. You will perhaps get the sense that I'm trying to say we are all Victor Hugos. We all can take action without knowing what may come of it. It's kind of an act of faith. We've had a day of joy and challenge and dreaming. And I want to do something crazy at the end. I want to help us to look at the challenges that we face as we go forward. Because I think if we can look out for the challenges, then we have a better chance of bringing into being this vision that we all dreamed up. So I just want to tell you what I think are the 5 challenges that will stop us from having an ACE-aware nation, and indeed an ACE-action nation. In fact, if I pause just for a moment, and you ask yourself, what do you think the biggest challenge is that could stop us from bringing this dream into being? Ask yourself, what would it be? You've got 10 seconds to decide. Because if you know what you think, then you can see whether it adds to my list, or whether it overlaps, or whether you disagree with anything on my list. You need to know what you think in order to make this happen. Here are my 5. I think the first thing that could stop us from having this is simple normality. Normality keeps us from seeing people's pain. Because when it's normal, we think it's okay. Once upon a time, not that long ago, in our country, we strapped children. We thought that belting them at school would help them to learn. And in 2018, that seems a crazy idea. But it didn't in the 1970s. Many of you in this audience went to school where you were strapped by teachers who must have thought they were helping because they can't have thought that they were hurting. Do you know how that stopped? Strapping stopped in our country because 2 brave mothers stood up and said, "Nah, you're not strapping my kid." And the school system wasn't happy with them about that. The National Association of Head Teachers at the time said this will be too confusing for the children who have been given permission to be beaten and the children whose parents have not given permission to be beaten. Please laugh if you like, because it sounds crazy now. But once upon a time, it was normal. I'm just trying to give an example from the past. If we understand what's normal, we can see through it, because today, it is harder to see in the day what you can't see. It's easier to see in the past. So the challenge to normality is curiosity. If we are curious enough to see beyond what is normal, then we start to see the pain that is often blocked from us. The second one is complacency. In the 1950s, children who went to hospital couldn't see their parents until the next visiting time. And that might have been in a week's time. And when psychologists at the time thought that that hospital practice might be damaging children, the nurses and doctors didn't stand up and say, "Tell us more, Mr. Robertson, about how you think we're damaging children." What they said was, "Are you telling us how to do our job? Are you telling us that you think better than us to know how to do our job?" They resisted hearing what concerned psychologists had to say. Now, they had the name attachment. If they'd been around today, I think they would have used the word ACEs. But the point is that they thought they were doing fine. And what James Robertson said 20 years on is that it is not because we don't have enough evidence and we don't have enough professionalism that stops us from serving children. It's that we do not have enough urgency. I know that there's one group here who, in worrying about what to provide to children, were told by some of the people in that line above them to slow down. This isn't a race. We've got time to think this out. I disagree. The children don't have time. Systems have time, but children don't have time. They've got a 1 shot in primary 1 and 1 shot at primary 2. So the counter to complacency is urgency. We need urgency, because our children want that of us. The third thing that I think that could stop us is shame. We have a country that is woven with shame. And it is shame that often sits at the heart of teachers who feel defensive when they hear that behavior charts are causing outcomes for children that they never planned on. It must have been shame that underpinned the nurses in the 1950s who would feel overwhelmed if they understood that all the children in that ward were crying because they were in pain. If you tune into those pain, you get overwhelmed with a ward of children crying. And it is shame that underpins the guilt that so many parents here feel when they begin to hear this. We have to find a way to talk about this without shame and without blame so that we can hear it. If we can't find a way to do it in language that lets people get curious, then the adults understandably have to shut down. So the counter to shame is forgiveness, self-forgiveness. You only knew what you knew. It's okay not to know. One of the podcasts we produced that's still on the website is by a mother in this room. She says I can name her name. Jennifer Riley sits in this room, and it took everything she had to tell the story of what it was like to learn about ACEs. Jennifer, you were brave, and every parent in this room who listens to your podcast knows that they too didn't have to know it all. The fourth thing that I think will keep us from having an ACE-aware nation is relying on the evidence. I think the evidence is really important. I'm a scientist. I like evidence. My whole career has been based in creating evidence, but evidence alone is not enough. Evidence doesn't change anything. Evidence is just a guide. What changes things is courage. Is the courage to think deeply about the evidence, and not everybody is convinced by ACEs, so you need to know what you think. The courage to think about evidence, and the courage to act. So if you think evidence on its own is going to be enough, it's not. It's why John Carnahan is so frustrated, because we've had the evidence for 20 years, and it hasn't had a movement until this year, when a film came along and gave enough people the courage to go back and say, I want that film in my setting, in my local authority. So what we need, along with the evidence, is the courage to act on it. And finally, the fifth thing that I think could keep us from being an ACE-aware nation is the notion of them and us. Them and us separates. It's very easy, I understand. It's really easy to say, this is about those communities of vulnerability over there. This is about the SIMD 1s and 2s. It's not. It's about all of us. I understand it's easy to feel uncomfortable about people who engage in activities and behaviors that might not be part of your life, my life, our life. People who use drugs, people who do things to get themselves in prison. But if we do not have enough curiosity, we created them, and this is not about them, this is about us. It is even easy to say, well, those are the ones with the scores of 4 and over, as opposed to 3 and lower. If this becomes a movement where them and us creep in, we will not succeed. There is no them and us, and the counter to them and us is us. This is about us. So if as you leave this hall, if you can keep an eye out for those 5 challenges, and we can figure out ways to counter them, and you have the courage enough to speak up, and even when you have to go into public, give up your PowerPoint slides too, if we have that kind of courage and curiosity and urgency and compassion and inclusion, we will have the ACE-aware nation that you all came along with me today to dream. Thank you very much. Thank you.